We've come now to the last of the deliverers in the book of Judges, Samson. Perhaps he is the judge that you best know. But do we really? Let's find out. Before we get into the Samson story, a small note on the people group called the Philistines. Around the same time that Israel came from Egypt and settled into Canaan, waves of people groups were migrating into the same region from the area of Greece. Some followed an overland route, others arrived by ship across the Mediterranean. These were called the Sea Peoples and included the Philistines. Originally, they had their sights on Egypt, but when that ambition failed, the Philistines settled along the coast. Their cities eventually formed a powerful pentapolis, a federation of 5 cities: Ashkelon, Gath, Gaza, Ashdod, and Ekron. Their most enduring contribution to the region is the name of their people group, the Philistines, from which the place name Palestine is derived. Given that the newly settled Israelites and the newly arriving Philistines were competing for the same narrow stretch of land between the Jordan and the Mediterranean Sea, clashes were inevitable. And that is where our story begins. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. Meanwhile, a certain man named Manoah had a wife who was childless, unable to give birth. The angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, "You are barren and childless, but you are going to become pregnant and give birth to a son. Now see to it that you drink no wine or other fermented drink, and that you do not eat anything unclean. You will become pregnant and have a son whose head is never to be touched by a razor, because the boy is to be a Nazirite, dedicated to God from the womb. He will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines." Then the woman went to her husband and told him, "A man of God came to me. He looked like an angel of God. Very awesome. I didn't ask him where he came from, and he didn't tell me his name. But he said to me, 'You will become pregnant and have a son. Now then, drink no wine or other fermented drink, then do not eat anything unclean, because the boy will be a Nazirite of God from the womb until the day of his death.'" Then Manoah prayed to the Lord, "Pardon your servant, Lord. I beg you to let the man of God you sent to us come again to teach us how to bring up the boy who is to be born." God heard Manoah, and the angel of God came again to the woman while she was out in the field. But her husband Manoah was not with her. The woman hurried to tell her husband, "He's here, the man who appeared to me the other day." Manoah got up and followed his wife. When he came to the man, he said, "Are you the man who talked to my wife?" "I am," he said. So Manoah asked him, "When your words are fulfilled, what is to be the rule that governs the boy's life and work?" The angel of the Lord answered, "Your wife must do all that I have told her. She must not eat anything that comes from the grapevine, nor drink any wine or other fermented drink, nor eat anything unclean. She must do everything I have commanded her." Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, "We would like you to stay until we prepare a young goat for you." The angel of the Lord replied, "Even though you detain me, I will not eat any of your food. But if you prepare a burnt offering, offer it to the Lord." Manoah did not realize that it was the angel of the Lord. Then Manoah inquired of the angel of the Lord, "Oh, what is your name, so that we may honor you when your word comes true?" He replied, "Why do you ask my name? It is beyond understanding." Then Manoah took a young goat together with a grain offering and sacrificed it on a rock to the Lord. And the Lord did an amazing thing while Manoah and his wife watched. As the flame blazed up from the altar toward heaven, the angel of the Lord ascended in the flame. Seeing this, Manoah and his wife fell with their faces to the ground. When the angel of the Lord did not show himself again to Manoah and his wife, Manoah realized that it was the angel of the Lord. "Oh, we are doomed to die," he said to his wife. "We have seen God." But his wife answered, "If the Lord had meant to kill us, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and grain offering from our hands, nor shown us all these things, or now told us all this." And so it came to pass that the woman gave birth to a boy and named him Samson. He grew, and the Lord blessed him. The story surprises us with its anti-Manoah bias. Think about it. First, there is the fact of the woman's childlessness. It echoes the barrenness of the great matriarchs of Israel, Sarah, Rebecca, and Rachel. And that motif immediately raises the status of Manoah's wife. Secondly, this elevated status is confirmed by an angelic visitation. In a thoroughly patriarchal society, it is unusual that the woman is given instructions on the upbringing of the miracle child to be born. No wonder Manoah belittles his wife's account of the incident by requesting a direct revelation. That the angel reappears to the woman is a deliberate slight to the man. Thirdly, a careful reading of the conversation reveals that Manoah is rebuffed at every turn. He learns not a single detail more than what his wife already told him. Rather, he is twice pointedly referred to his wife for further specifications. His offer of hospitality is declined, and when he asks for the messenger's name, he is cut down to size. Fourthly, the sketch of Manoah that emerges is that of a male chauvinist, a skeptic who must see for himself in order to believe, and a clumsy conversationalist. Fifthly, and most significantly, the wife outstrips Manoah in discernment. It takes many steps for Manoah to realize that it was the angel of the Lord. He needs disappearances rather than appearances to help him see. She, meanwhile, immediately recognizes the awesomeness of this being. She thinks he may be a man of God, perhaps even an angel of God. As such, she conducts herself in contrast to her blundering husband and discreetly refrains from probing further. "I didn't ask him where he came from, and he didn't tell me his name," she says. When it is revealed to the couple that the being's name is beyond understanding, and then climactically that they have seen God himself, the wife's response is as enlightened as Manoah's is dim. Though Manoah is correct that no one can see God and live, his wife is even more correct than him. Why would God kill them when the divine purpose was for her to give birth? In short, the entire episode showcases the woman. It opens with divine favor announced to her and closes with her naming the wonder child. Samson, unfortunately, will not take after his mother, but rather his dim, unperceptive father. And though a devout woman birthed him, Samson will allow a devious one to bring about his death. Another feature of the birth narrative of Samson is the Nazirite vow. You can read it all up in Numbers chapter 6 verses 1 to 21. Now the word Nazir comes from the root meaning to dedicate or to consecrate. As such, the vow was taken by an adult, any Israelite adult, usually male, wishing to declare his dedication to God. For a limited period, he would follow 3 restrictions, all of which made his inward vow outwardly visible in community. He would refrain from any product of the grapevine, he would refrain from contact with a corpse, and he would refrain from cutting his hair. At the end of the period of the vow, the hair was ceremonially cut and burned, marking the end of the period and indicating that the person could now assume normal routine. Here, in the Samson birth story, is an extraordinary application of this Nazirite vow. First, it is imposed on Samson rather than taken voluntarily, indicating that God Himself declares him set apart. Second, the vow takes effect prenatally from the very moment of conception rather than during adulthood. And thirdly, the vow covers him from the womb to the tomb until the day of his death. We know perhaps of only 2 others similar to Samson: Samuel and John the Baptist. Fourthly, so rigorously does the law of the Nazirite apply to the unborn child that even the body that incubates him must come under the rigor of the vow. Manoah's wife must neither drink any alcoholic drink nor eat anything unclean. The outcome of these restrictions is that no prohibited food or drink will taint the growing baby, even indirectly. And so the baby is born, and the woman, despite her many virtues, names the child Samson. The word Samson comes from the word Shemesh, which means sun, S-U-N. Beth Shemesh, the house of Shemesh, or the house of the sun, was just a few miles down from where Samson's family lived. It was a center of sun worship, and it is possible that the couple actually named him for a pagan deity, even though Yahweh had caused the miracle. Into this darkness of the Israelite mind shines the little sun, Shimshon or Samson. Samson is selected prenatally, his birth is extravagantly announced, God oversees his growth into adulthood, and the empowering Spirit of God began to stir him towards his life's task. Even his name, Little Son, pagan though it may be, raises enormous expectations. Will he match them? Let's see. Samson went down to Timnah and saw there a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, "I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife." His father and mother replied, "Isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among all our people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife? But Samson said to his father, Get her for me. She is the right one. The objection that Samson's parents make is interesting both for what they say and for what they do not say. In the Old Testament, the term uncircumcised is used only of the Philistines rather than any of the Canaanite people groups. Extra-biblical evidence shows that circumcision was practiced by the Semitic peoples, which included the various Canaanite people groups and also the Israelites. Given this, it is probable that the parents were objecting to the Philistine woman on the grounds of socio-cultural differences rather than on religious principles. It is possible that for them, all our people included the Canaanite populations with which Israel had merged in this period of the Judges. More specifically, the parents were clearly entrusted with the task of rearing a Nazirite. They should have drawn Samson's attention to his dedicated task as a Nazirite. He was to deliver Israel from the Philistines, not marry them. Just as is the custom in India, the boy's party now goes off to see the girl. Samson went down to Timnah together with his father and mother. As they approached the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a young lion came roaring towards him. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him so that he tore the lion apart with his bare hands as he might have torn a young goat. But he told neither his father nor his mother what he had done, which means to say that Samson had gone into the vineyards on a detour on his own, having parted company with his parents during the time that this adventure happened. Then he rejoins his family and they went down to Timnah, talked with the woman, and Samson liked her. Now the party comes back, probably with a date arranged for the wedding. Sometime later, when Samson went back to marry her, he turned aside to look at the lion's carcass, and in it he saw a swarm of bees and some honey. He scooped out the honey with his hands and ate as he went along. When he rejoined his parents, he gave them some, and they too ate it, but he did not tell them that he had taken the honey from the lion's carcass. This story is the first display of Samson's legendary strength. Because we are so familiar with it, having heard it in Sunday school, we might not notice the series of violations of the Nazirite vow. To begin with, the action happens in a vineyard. On the way to enemy country, to engage in a prohibited marriage, Samson stops in a place specifically forbidden to him, a vineyard. Not once, but twice. We notice that he refrains from sharing the experience with his parents, perhaps because he knew his actions were wrong and would invite their rebuke. What business did he have in a vineyard? On the second visit, there is the dead lion. It appears that the carcass of the lion dehydrated in the heat so rapidly that it bypassed decay. And a swarm of bees found this dry structure, perhaps the rib cage, exactly what they wanted for building a hive in. Any Israelite would have recognized the honey produced in such a location as unclean. No wonder Samson hides from his parents the source of the honey. Samson scooped the honey with his hands and ate as he went along. He pollutes himself externally through contact with the corpse, and internally through consuming that which was produced in a corpse. He eats as he walks along carelessly, showing how lightly he took his Nazirite consecration. And what is more, by sharing the honey with his parents, he defiles the very people who sanctified him. When Samson reached Timnah, he held a feast, his wedding feast. The Philistines chose 30 men to be his companions, something like the best men that we have today to accompany a groom. Samson held a feast. Now this seems harmless enough till scholars inform us that the Hebrew word for feast in this particular context indicates a 7-day drinking binge. Samson, the Nazirite, participates in a week-long stag party. We are told that this was customary for the Philistines. In this intermarriage, the irony is that the Philistine family adheres to custom while the Israelite family disregards theirs. In this drinking bout, Samson thinks nothing of overruling his Israelite Nazirite regulation so as to observe a Philistine one. As if marrying into the oppressor enemy was not enough, Samson now plays games with them. "Let me tell you a riddle," Samson said to them. "If you can give me the answer within the 7 days of the feast, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. If you can't tell me the answer, you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes." "Tell us your riddle," they said. "Let's hear it." He replied, "Out of the eater something to eat, out of the strong something sweet." Now, we may think it unfair that only Samson can know the answer to this riddle. How on earth were the 30 Philistine men to know it? Such kind of riddles may have been accepted in those days, but more probably this could be a display of Samson's arrogance, his now familiar arrogance. Samson makes the rules that he lives by. Meanwhile, on the 4th day of the wedding week, the 30 Philistines said to Samson's wife, "Coax your husband into explaining the riddle for us, or we will burn you and your father's household to death. Did you invite us here to steal our property?" What property are we talking about? They are talking about the stakes of the contest. 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. Now this refers to 30 sets of luxurious outer garments or capes with 30 similar sets of fine inner clothing to wear. This would have been festival clothing, not cheap. No wonder the Philistines are not at all willing to suffer the damage that losing this context will do to their purses. Then Samson's wife threw herself on him, sobbing, "You hate me, you don't really love me. You've given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer." "I haven't even explained it to my father or mother," he replied. "So why should I explain it to you?" But she cried the whole 7 days of the feast. So on the 7th day, he finally told her because she continued to press him. And then she in turn explained the riddle to her people. If it was a wedding week, and the Philistines devised their strategy of blackmail on the fourth day, we must understand that she cried the remaining 3 days of the feast. For 3 nights, she in turn applied emotional blackmail on Samson, and it took him 3 days to crack under pressure. On the fourth day, he lets the secret out. This anticipates a later story in Samson's life, when Samson will again yield under pressure on the fourth time. The victim, however, is going to be himself. Meanwhile, now the Philistines return the answer to Samson's riddle with a couplet of their own. Before sunset on the 7th day, the men of the town said to him, "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" Samson is infuriated and spits out another 2-liner. "If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle. If you had not used my wife," he means to say, "you would not have got the answer to my riddle." Then the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon Samson. He went down to Ashkelon, struck down 30 Philistine men, stripped them of everything, and gave their clothes to those who had explained the riddle. Burning with anger, he returned to his father's home, and Samson's wife was given to one of his companions who had attended him at the feast, one of those best men from the party of 30. When he leaves in a rage, Samson's father-in-law imagines that Samson has deserted his wife and quickly makes an alternative arrangement. He marries her off to one of the best men. The Philistines have won the contest. But it is ironic that it is their own people, Philistines, in another city, in the city of Ashkelon, who have paid for it. For the 30 sets of clothing that the Timnites receive, Ashkelon, 20 miles away, has paid with blood. As the wedding party collapses into a storm of angry words and angrier gestures, we realize that the war has begun. Philistia has suffered its initial casualties. God, the true deliverer, has achieved his purpose through Samson's extraordinary strength. In fact, this is the only judge in this book whom the Spirit repeatedly empowers, and what is more, the description of empowerment is intensified. The Spirit of the Lord comes on Samson in power. However, Samson doesn't cover himself with glory, not by any means. What we have understood of Samson is that he is an obstinate, willful son. He is an unreliable husband, but most significantly, he is a disloyal devotee of his God. Here is a man with uncontrollable need for physical gratification, a reckless leader who acts for personal satisfaction and not for national security. Yet, through all of this, he ends up executing the larger purposes of God for Israel. You can stop at this point and go and read up again the Samson story in Judges chapters 13 and 14. Think about what you would like to take away. When our story opened today, we saw Samson in love with a girl from Timnah. When the story closed, he had deserted his wife and was burning with anger. love and anger. Samson is a man of emotions, deep and even violent emotions. And in between the opening and the closing, we saw how Samson acted in his own interests rather than in the interest of Israel or even the interest of God who had commissioned him to save Israel. But here is the interesting point. While Samson charts his course of actions guided by private interests, God uses him to accomplish the public task. Think about it. Maybe we are also behaving like Samson. We keep making our choices and deciding how we will act, or how we will speak, or even how we will think, totally guided by self-interest. We may be successful in what we do, successful in work, successful in our study, successful even in contributing to the kingdom of God, but that doesn't mean to say that God endorses all that we do in self-interest. God may use us and yet be displeased with how we are living our life, with how we are making our decisions. We'll think about this a little more when we come to the second half of Samson's life. Till then, stay safe.